revealed by light as it sort of fades in, as if through an almost instant sunrise. Second, as the shot pans across these distant blue mountains and then the iconic Shiprock Formation, there is in the immediate foreground this mostly bare patch of ground where you as the viewer are sort of placed as though welcomed into the picture as you view this horizon. And that's all within the first 2 seconds or less of the film. In paying attention to the way the film is made, in addition to the story that it's telling, I noticed things like this constantly. And as a result of that, not only was I moved by the story, but I was deeply impressed by Emerson's craft or her artistry in her documentary work. When I learned that she had also written a first novel called Shutter, now forthcoming, I was all the more convinced that Ramona Emerson was an exciting choice for Seesaw to have as a novel lecturer. And I welcome her to our campus, albeit via Zoom. And on that note, I'll add that this event is well over a year in coming, as we first had it booked for spring of 2020. But of course, other events occurred. So we're glad to finally have Ramona at WT. For those of you who are new to the Nall Lecture, again, welcome and thank you for coming. Each fall and spring, the Gary L. Nall Lecture in Western Studies brings scholars and artists of our region, of the American West, here to West Texas A&M University for a lecture and for other events. Ramona Emerson is Diné, or Navajo, a filmmaker and writer, originally from Tehachapi, New Mexico. She received her bachelor's degree in media arts from the University of New Mexico and her Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. In addition to making films, she's worked as a professional videographer, including legal and forensic video work for the legal community. And that's an experience which figures heavily into her fiction and her projected trilogy of Shutter novels. Since completing her documentary Mayors of Shiprock in 2017, film which won great acclaim, Emerson has continued through her company Real Indian Pictures to make films. She's currently working on a project called Crossing the Line, an examination of issues of Diné borderlands communities, Farmington, Gallup, and Albuquerque. This shift in perspective, looking at the world from the reservation, is characteristic of her work, which, as she puts it, seeks to look at contemporary stories about her people and question and redefine expectations of Native cultural identity, highlighting stories that are not a part of mainstream media. In recognition of her work, Emerson has been named a Sundance Native Lab Fellow, Time Warner Storyteller Fellow, Tribeca All Access Grantee, and WGBH Producer Fellow. In bringing Ramona Emerson for the Nall Lecture, we hope to draw attention to our large and important Indigenous history and legacy here on the Southern Plains, here in the Comanche area. We know that we're surrounded by sites important to Comanche, Kiowa, Southern Cheyenne, and other Indigenous peoples, including, of course, battlegrounds of the 1874 Red River War. We're also not far from Bosque Redondo in eastern New Mexico, a site important to a terrible chapter of Navajo history, which I wanted to acknowledge this evening. But it's not all about history, and it's not all bad either. In fact, Emerson's work is very important, I think, for its contemporary attention, its insistence on making Indigenous people who have a long history of representation in the past tense through Western genre films, to make Native people present in the present instead. And her film is noteworthy for telling a story that's positive and constructive and future looking, a film about making positive change through an act of will. And in that context, her work resonates in certain ways with my experience and the experience of many of my colleagues here at WT, and having students in our classes who are Comanche or Navajo or Cheyenne or Ponca or whatever the case may be. students who are out to change their world and change their place in it. Also, I wanted to bring attention to a common issue that I think cuts across lines of geography and ethnicity. Specifically in Mayors of Shiprock, I was interested in the focus on young people and rural community, because many of those issues that are issues of opportunity and economic progress and education and the retention of one's younger generation, these are issues faced by many small communities here on the Southern Plains. So that's something that we might all think about together. In keeping with that focus on youth and students, I just want to mention that prior to speaking to us this evening, Ramona judged the WT Student Video Contest, which we actually did a year ago. And today spoke with Mass Comm students about making documentary film, and spoke to a group of English and creative writing students about writing fiction and getting published. And we appreciate very much this engagement with our students. Before we get this started, I want to quickly thank the Distinguished Lecture Series at West Texas A&M University for their generous support of this event. As you listen this evening, please note questions you may have that you can speak afterwards in the Q&A session, or you can type your questions into the chat feature here on this seminar, and we can read your questions afterwards for you. So with that, again, thank you all for coming. Please join me in welcoming Ramona Emerson to West Texas A&M University for the Knoll Lecture.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope. Okay. So thank you all so much for coming here tonight, and then also thank you for watching the Mayors of Shiprock. I know you guys had access to watching it earlier, so thank you for supporting the film, and also even last year, and pushing through this 1 year to finally actually do the lecture. So thank you so much for that, and for the generosity of everyone here, the faculty, and everyone here at West Texas. It's been a very long 3 years since we made the Mayors of Shiprock, and I have to say that every day I think of all the kids in the film, and I wonder what they're doing today. And I am lucky to have their Facebook and their Instagram and social media feeds constantly updating me on things that are happening in their lives. But the story of Mayors of Shiprock really started early on in the year 2010, when we were in Shiprock filming another project called Hidden Talents. And that short film was a kind of documentary narrative hybrid that showcased the life and work of James Woolenshirt King, who was a painter in Shiprock who passed away last year. But we, in the process of making that film, were introduced to Graham Bayall, who consequently became the main focus of the Mayors of Shiprock. In those days, he was thinking about maybe going into media or film as a career, and he had reached out to both myself and Nanaba Becker, another Navajo filmmaker who is based in LA, kind of about just brainstorming about what he could do as a young filmmaker. So he came out and worked with us on Hidden Talents as a camera assistant, and in that process, we just kind of started talking to him, and he told us a little bit about some of the community work that he was doing there in Shiprock, which included a volleyball tournament, a sand volleyball tournament that he and a few kids in his family had put together for the community, just something to do to keep healthy and energized during the summer months. And it helped them raise some money and kind of really think about what could they do in their community. That's how it started. And back then in 2010, it was Graham, fresh out of high school, maybe 18, 19 years old, with just the world ahead of him. And he was already working in his community. And so maybe a couple of years later, I had kept in touch with him, and I just kept seeing all these posts on Facebook and all over social media about we're going to have a community meeting this evening, or we're going to be talking with the chapter president. And I just thought, wow, look at this guy's really engaged in the community. And the more I watched what the work he was doing, the more I wanted to hear more. And I kind of gave him the nickname, the Mayor of Shiprock, just kind of jokingly, because I just noticed nobody else in Shiprock but Graham Bayal. There was nobody else doing the things. Even our leadership there, they weren't really part of social media or anything like that. So everything I saw coming out of Shiprock was from Graham Bayal. And so the thing about Shiprock that a lot of people don't understand, and about the Navajo Nation and a lot of reservation kind of bureaucratic BIA government-run entities that are sovereign nations have become, including the Navajo Nation. So when I say the mayors of Shiprock, it started out as a joke, just calling Graham that. And I'll tell you exactly how the actual name developed into the mayors of Shiprock further down into the story. But the thing about it is that there are no services for the Navajo Nation out there. Shiprock is a town of thousands of people, but they don't have basic things like trash, like a trash truck that comes through and picks up trash, or reliable water or electricity. Just the basic necessities. In some ways they don't have, and a lot of the people in the community live at or below the poverty level. They don't have much out there in Shiprock, and as you can see, post-COVID, I think COVID exposed a lot of what inequities and a lot of the things that are going on reservations across our country, as far as access to healthcare, access to clean water, access to electricity, broadband, things like that. So only now has the pandemic kind of really highlighted all the inequities that have been going on for years. There's never been electricity in some communities. There's never been running water in some communities. And Shiprock is one of those communities. So when you say the mayors of Shiprock, there is no mayor. There is a chapter house that has a few Navajo leaders who report to a larger council, who report to an even larger council, who report to the BIA, basically. And that's how things are run. And basically nothing ever gets done. Things happen there all the time. Things just don't get done. It's just too much red tape, too much bureaucracy, and it's just everything's just kind of tied in limbo there. So getting anything done in my own community of Tohatchi, I always knew to be an issue. Everything is always an issue. You have to go and ask the chapter, who asks the delegate, who asks the board, who asks the council, and then like 5 years later you might get an answer. And that's how things work around the reservation. So meeting and working early on with Graham and the NDYC, we actually just called them one day and said, hey, we'd like to come to one of your meetings, because they're at this point having meetings. This is like 2012. At this point, they're having meetings every Monday at 7 p.m. And after their school or sports commitments, on Monday evenings, they would all head over to a drop-in center that they had there in Shiprock, and they would have meetings. And at our first meeting we went to, we just kind of sat there like a fly on the wall and just kind of listened to what they were doing. We took still photos, but we didn't bring our cameras in yet. And we just kind of were amazed by how together they were as a group. They already had like articles, and they were delegating authority and delegating responsibilities to each other, and coming up with plans and ways that they were going to do things in their community. And every week they did the same thing. They would plan, okay, this week we're going to go and pick up trash along the highway from the fairgrounds all the way over to the school. I mean, they had very concrete ideas about what they wanted to do. We were just blown away by, these are kids who, Graham was about 18. He had a couple of older sisters who were involved, who were in their early 20s. And basically everybody else was 18 and under, all the way down to like we had some 12 and 13-year-old members that were there. So that's that. On that day, we just kind of just said, we think what you guys are doing is amazing, and we would really like to just come in with our cameras and like make a little short documentary about the work you're doing. Maybe you guys could use it as a promotional piece for raising more money for some of your work, or doing something like that. Um, so that's how it started. And immediately from that week on, they were like, sure, whatever you want to do. And um, we started coming in, and it was at first it was very difficult to pin young Navajo teenagers down to dates. You tell them we're going to come and interview you at 10 o'clock on Wednesday. I can pretty much guarantee you at 10 o'clock on Wednesday they were not going to be where you asked them to be. And many times, my husband, our producer, would have to actually physically go around town and find them, track them down, and bring them in for their interviews. It was kind of hard at the beginning. It was a challenge, and but eventually, after a while, I think they just kind of had seen other media people come into the community of Shiprock before, and they've done films. Shiprock's a popular place to film, so they'd seen that kind of thing come into their community, and I think it was always outsiders who were coming into their community and doing this work. And so when we showed up, it was just kind of like, oh, there's just another member of NDYC in the room, and they really treated us that way. We were one of them. We went to all of their, well, as many as we could, because we were in Albuquerque, and the trip between Albuquerque and Shiprock is about a good 3 hours. So you have to drive way up to get to them. And they would sometimes call me the day before events were going to happen and say, oh, Ramona, we're going to have a dodgeball tournament, or whatever, it's going to happen tomorrow at 7. And I'd have to figure out what to do really quick and get all the gear in the car and race up there the next morning to film this thing. It was absolute craziness. And this went on for probably, I think the shooting itself actually went on for 5 years. 5 years. And so we watched them develop, all of them, into young adults, and they became the people who you see today right in front of our eyes. But the great thing about it was, because of the time that we had invested in meeting them, and we spent time at their homes with them, we understood what their interests were, and we would go film them doing things that they enjoyed. And it just kind of built and built and built until we all had this very personal relationship with each of the members. And I feel like um, Graham and his family really adopted me into their world. They were so generous, and they allowed me complete and total access, and were very open about sharing their story with us, and about sharing everything as they are in their community. They are an extraordinary family, the Bayals. Um, Anyone in Shiprock will tell you that they are always of service in their communities. Um, since they were young people, they've always been a part of that. So what Graham was doing basically was taking all of the things that he had been taught by his mom and his family, and this whole idea of giving back and sharing with the community. And um, instead of taking, always giving, I think. And that's kind of I think that's kind of the mode that he and his brothers and sisters were instilled with, through really through their mother and her service to the community of Shiprock. So in the process of doing this film, we originally started the film out entitled "The Mayor of Shiprock," and early push on PBS wanted us to really focus on Graham Bayal. I think that a lot of mainstream documentary film really relies heavily on that one character, one protagonist narrative. They really enjoy that. Either that, or you have to have several different things going on. There's always this formula that they like you to follow. And so for us, it was following that one person and them being the catalyst to drive the narrative of the story. So early on for us, that was Graham. And I would say maybe 2.5 years into maybe even 3 years into making the film, um, we had edited a trailer, and we had gotten more support from PBS, and the project had turned into a little short film into a larger feature project. And we continued to shoot with them every month, or on one event or another. And it was just one day, I think Graham just kind of took me aside and told me flat out that he was very uncomfortable with the fact that I was naming this film The Mayor of Shiprock. And this is 3 years into the process. I've already been just like pitching this film about Graham Bayal, and about all the work he's doing, and about what a great community leader he is. And here was my main protagonist basically telling me that he didn't want that. He didn't want that to happen. He felt like that he would have personal pressure within the community. Like he says, I don't want all the grandmas and aunties coming to me and telling me that I am conceited and I am trying to take credit for all this work that we're doing in the community. And he said, and I don't feel comfortable. I really don't. And so Kelly and I came back and we brainstormed a million other titles. We talked to Vision Maker at the PBS and kind of broke the news that we were going to have to change the title of the film and possibly even the trajectory of the film. So it was a very daunting time. It was like 3 years into the process. And um, I think, it kind of awakened me to something that I didn't realize. And that was that I was falling into that narrative, that one person drive, that one narrative that kind of steps away from Navajo conceptual thought about community and about ke, which is basically, like how you treat each other and you treat each other as a family and everybody in all the Navajos that need your help, you need to help them. That's your family. That's what you do. And it's not about you, and it's not about singling one person out and giving them all the praise and glory. It's about working together as a unit to create change, to do the work that needs to be done. So that was kind of like finally I was realizing that the narrative, that structure that I had been striving for had been kind of like just me following that formula, that PBS documentary formula. And I realized we don't need to do that. We What he's asking us to do is to make sure that we see everyone, not just him. It's just not about us seeing him. It's about us seeing what everyone is doing. And it finally like, oh, my cat is like getting ready to jump. Sorry, I could hear her. Cat a cameo. Um, so at that point, the film changed, and we stopped hanging out with Graham, and we began to develop relationships with all the other members of the Northern Dene Youth Committee. And that's when we started following Alicio, we started following Kevin, we started following his brothers and sisters, we followed Adam, we followed everybody. We just started really developing and creating relationships with all the members that we could see that were taking an active um, leadership role. And Graham always pushed them. Like that was part of it. When you see the mayors of Shiprock, you see that Graham is like slowly pushing himself out of the circle because he understands that, yes, he started this and he and his sisters started this idea, but the idea was always that it would be the youth that would carry it on. And that was what was great about the Northern Dene Youth Committee, is that they weren't part of like the Navajo Nation Youth Corps, or they didn't have to be part of the larger governmental structure in order to create change. They could create change on their own. And because they understood the bureaucracy and the red tape involved within the Navajo Nation government, then they knew that they had to do these things sometimes on the sly. They didn't tell people, "Oh, we're going to go and get this playground and bring it back down," because that would have taken 3 years of paperwork in the Navajo Nation government. So instead of doing that, they just went up and got it and put it there. And what are they going to say? Nothing, because they know we need it. They know the kids needed a playground. They knew that their community needs certain things, and instead of asking, they just did it. And in some ways, in a place like on the Navajo reservation and on many reservations all over this country, that's the kind of thing that you have to do. If you're going to make change, you have to push that change. You have to put yourself on the line. It doesn't matter if you're on the streets of Shiprock picking up trash or standing in front of a line of police and Standing Rock. It's all about protecting your community and creating that idea of ke, that idea of developing and strengthening and maintaining your family relationship with the other humans on the planet. And that's basically what Navajo thought and Navajo practice teaches. So inadvertently, these young people really brought me back to that concept, because I think for many years making films, you make films, you want to get them. It's all about getting in the film festivals. It's all about furthering your career and getting things on track. And so you keep that trajectory and you keep your work getting out there and you keep pushing, pushing, pushing. And I think what the Mayors of Shiprock kind of taught me was like, it slowed me down. Of course, it took us 5 years. I think the longest up to that point we had worked on a film was 3 years. We had took through 3 years to make the last trek. Um, and then a return home took 6 months. So there's like huge variances here about what and how long it takes to do these films. But that 5 hour invest or 5 year investment that we put in the Mayors of Shiprock, I think really helped to not only develop our portrait of how community works on the Navajo reservation, but also how important their work was and how timely it was. At the time, there was so much going on the Navajo reservation, and they just kind of sidestepped it and worked in their own way to get things done. And that's what was important for us, is to showcase that dynamic talent that they had. So, when we started to hang out with all of these other young people, we were just blown away by how much talent and how much uh, um, passion they had for the community of Shiprock and actually for even for their own cultural knowledge. I think a lot of this stuff came back to them, to me, and to them at the same time. They relished in learning traditional things. They had game nights. There's so many more things that are involved in what they did that didn't make it into the film. We didn't include because we just didn't have the time. So I think almost at the end of the documentary process, we got to travel with them when they went to Los Angeles, and they put that whole thing together themselves and had all those food sales and raised all that money, and it was we there was lots of craziness that went on getting them there. Like the rental car didn't show up and a lot of stuff happened and things were delayed. So our shoot was kind of crazy in LA, but we did get everything done, and it was in they're all standing out there at the beach at one point, and I realized that right then and there that most of those young people had never seen the ocean before. I mean, these are the kinds of things that I think is important for them to understand so that they can see their future and they can see beyond like the streets of Shiprock. And it's so often young people become kind of stagnant and they become part of all of the things that can happen to you when you're stuck on the reservation and you have no resources and it feels like you have no future and you have no way out, and it's very easy to fall into that whole idea that this is just your lot in life, and this is what you have been given. And that for many years is what I saw in my generation. A lot of apathy, a lot of young people who forgot their language, who had no interest in traditional beliefs or thinking about their health or their body or their community for that matter. So seeing these young people do such extraordinary things was quite incredible. So when we first started filming, Adam, who at the end of the film is the young man who ends up running for the school board. In the beginning, when we first started filming the Mayors of Shiprock, I think Adam was still in high school. He was 17 years old. So we met him early on. He came to a few of the meetings, and he has he wouldn't say a word. He was so quiet. He would just laugh and put his hands over. I mean, he was just totally not the young man that you see at the end of the film. He was the complete opposite. So that was one of the major things that I saw develop over time, was just the fact that all of these young people were teaching all of us older people how to act, teaching us, I think, things that maybe our grandparents taught us but we had forgotten. And it was extraordinary to see them revive those thoughts, revive those actions, and put it into action. There were, I will say, there were some people in the Shiprock community. There's always somebody that has to complain, or they have something negative to say. Like those young people could never do enough for some people. They couldn't speak Navajo well enough. They weren't Navajo enough, or they weren't doing like, what about my family? You didn't come help my family. You know, it's like always these kind of discussions. And in the process of making the film and trying to look for funding, everybody always asked us, well, where's the conflict? Because this is all part of that prescribed PBS formula. They need the conflict in order for there to be that one savior character, or that one group, or that one uh, chasm of people that rises up and changes things. So they constantly, in our quest to move from the production end into the post production part of our documentary, we ran into a huge brick wall in terms of funding. We had edited together a long version of the film, and we knew we needed to cut it down. We knew we needed to do a lot of things, but we needed more funding. I am not. I will say I was not really an editor. I was just kind of an editor, like a utilitarian editor, I would say, at that point. So I could do some editing, but nothing to the point of where I felt like I could edit a broadcast distributed documentary, a feature. I thought that was too far out of my league. And I struggled for 2 years, 2 or 3 years, we struggled to find funding to complete our film. We needed to hire an editor. We needed to get color correction and sound design and sound mix for our broadcast, and we just had no money. I applied to ITVS, the International Television Service, in San Francisco, 8 separate times, and was rejected every single time. And every single time they always said, "Where is the tension? Where's that narrative curve?" And I finally, realized that my sixth application in, and after having many discussions with other filmmakers of color, that what they wanted was poverty. And I think it's kind of what we documentary filmmakers commonly refer to as poverty porn, which is they need to see that hardship. Like they physically need to see the hardship in order to believe that there's something coming out of it. It's all part of that narrative thread and the narrative arc. You know, the Sisyphean, the stone, and the getting to the rise, and all of that crazy dramatic stuff that happens in every standard documentary. And it's sad. I had seen for years many, even native led, native directed documentaries that kind of, focused on the old drunk dad, or the alcoholic problem in the neighborhood, or the drug addictions, or the suicides, and the, just the all the poverty and the things that go on the reservations, and I had seen that. I mean, I'd seen it from all the way from Diane Sawyer to native filmmakers making their own films, because that's what they want you to play into in order to get the funding. And I realized that pretty quickly, that we probably weren't going to get the funding, because I just we both in good conscience could not make that film. I refused to make that film. I don't like to dwell on. We know what the issues are because we've had a million other documentaries and news and media and national news all focusing on the issues and the poverty problems that we have on the reservation. We understand those issues. So you can see in the mayors of Shiprock that it's only really touched on very quickly and personally, on a personal level, as far as Graham talks about his own personal issues with alcoholism, not for him, but within his family. And so in the process of going and telling that story, um, I realized that what we were doing was we were telling a Navajo story. And a lot of Navajo stories, well, start in one place, and it tells a story, but it comes back to where we started from. It goes full circle. And I find that to be more of an indigenous narrative thread. And who's to say, um, it really made me think about, like, well, who's to say that PBS is the only person that knows, or the only entity that knows how to make documentaries, and who's to say we can make an experimental documentary where everything's edited backwards? Who's to say we can't make a narrative documentary, or a docu-series documentary that uses strange visuals, or experimental editing processes? Nobody. But we've fallen into this, I think, kind of like stamped idea of what documentary looks like. This is how you make it. This is how you start the story. This is how you frame an interview. This is how you create your storyline. And we reject that. I reject that. I think that um, anyone, everyone who tells a story is going to tell a story in their own way. And if, as a funder and a supporter of the arts, you are dictating to them how you want them to tell your story, then you're not really supporting Indigenous thought, or you're not really supporting these filmmakers who are trying to make revolutionary cinema, who are trying to change up the way we've been trained to see cinema. And cinema is a medium of constantly changing technology, constantly changing methods. So why not develop and change the way we tell documentary stories? And I think that only now are they starting to see the potential in that. But even back in 2017, or in 20 down to 2015, they were still trying to get us to fit into that little box. So in the end, when it came down to it, I realized that, well, I had a I was going to probably have to edit it myself. And I have a dear friend named Melissa Henry, who is another Navajo filmmaker. If you don't know of her, please look her up. She does a lot of great animation work, and she works a lot in puppetry animation. She works a lot with young kids, and working on Navajo language films. Great stuff. So she is the one who edited the trailer for the Mayors of Shiprock, and she, in the process of editing the trailer, she taught me how to edit, and we sat at the edit bay together, and she just said, "This is it's really easy, Ramona, and you're gonna just pick it up. All you do is this, and this is how you clip it, this is how you move it, and it's real easy. You see how I'm doing it, and here's how you put the music on top." And it was just like a day of sitting there with her and watching her do it. At the time, she was a professor at the University of New Mexico, and she was teaching editing and other things. And so she taught me. I sat there and watched her edit, and figured it out. And then I came back, and whatever I couldn't figure it out, I looked up on YouTube, or I called Premiere report or support, and asked them, "I'm stuck here. What am I doing wrong?" Anyway, so I just taught myself how to cut it together, and we put it together. And we sat through many, many cuts and watched many different things, and it still was too long. It was still an hour and a half. I was in the middle of getting my MFA program, and PBS was like looking at their watch and telling me, like, "We should have had this film like 2 years ago. What's wrong? What's going on? What's wrong with you?" And she kind of just gave me a reprieve, because she knew I was getting my MFA at the time. So I was kind of juggling this book, and finishing up the Mayors of Shiprock, and trying to edit it at the same time. And I was struggling. And my husband and I had looked at the film like 100 times, and we were done looking at the film. We didn't even know what to do at that point. We were just done. And I talked to Vision Maker, and I asked them. I had gone to a workshop with a filmmaker, teacher, lecturer named Fernanda Rossi. And Fernanda Rossi, they call her the documentary doctor. And I had been to a couple of her seminars before, and I knew that she helped. When you were having a hard time with your doc, she could help you. And I thought, you know what? I haven't talked to Fernanda Rossi in a long time. And I contacted a Vision Maker, and I asked them if they could help me with some funding to pay Fernanda Rossi to help me with the writing process of the documentary. That I was at this real bad stale point in the edit, and I needed help. I needed another set of eyes to help me get through the editing process, and I couldn't get any funding, and I was just I was in a funk. So they said yes, and I was able to hire Fernanda Rossi, and she came on with me, and the early cuts, she came on, and I sent her an early cut. She watched it. She got on the phone with me the next day and just said, "Ramona, okay, I want you to sit down and let's talk this out." And she goes, "I watched your documentary like 3 times last night." And she said, "Tell me right now, tell me, what is this story about? Like, what is important to you about this story? And I told her, well, it's their story. Their story is important to me. I want to make sure that I am doing justice to the work they're doing. And the story that they're telling me, that's what's the most important to me. So she came back to me a week later and she said, Ramona, I want you to cut all the white people that you put in your film out. Like, and I was kind of shocked. I had like the principal of the Shiprock High School. I had several different people that had come on and talked about the work because they lived in Shiprock and they were part of the community too. But they were obviously outsiders. They weren't part of the NDYC group and they were not like part of the film families of any of the members. They were these other outside people that I had interviewed. And I was like, "What? Are you sure?" I mean, in like one of the members of NDYC, the white guy, it's so. I mean, she was like, "No." She goes, I know it sounds weird or whatever." She goes, "But you told me what was important. Now go and do what I told you, and then come back to me tomorrow. And go do what I tell you. Look at it again, and then we'll talk again tomorrow." And when I did that, the film shrunk from an hour and a half to like an hour and 5 minutes, and it was so much more succinct because it was only about them and it was only about their families. Even my insertions that I had put in there, I took even anything I had said or thought about had been pulled out. I took everything out that didn't belong to them, and it changed the film. She really helped me. Then we went through a few more times and took out a few things that I had that was extra and cut some stuff down and moved some things around and did some stuff. But that was the point when our film was finally at a point where I felt comfortable letting other people see it. And it happened to be right about the same time that I was finishing up the MFA program. I talked to my old friend, Brent Michael Davids, who is a composer. He told me how much money he needed to do the score. We went to the New Mexico Film Foundation and a couple of other people just looking for enough small grants to pay for just the music, just to pay for the score. And we managed to get like 2 or 3 grants together that were $2,000 or $3,000 a piece. We took all that money and we paid Brent Michael Davids so he could do the score. When we got it ready for broadcast, after I had the edit and the score in place, I still had not color corrected and I still had not done the sound design or the sound mix. And I called around to places to find out how much that was going to cost. Also, way did not have the money for that. So I called Michael Kamens at KNME, which is our local New Mexico PBS station, and I told them what was going on. We got this film, it's supposed to be ready for broadcast by November, and I need to get color correction and sound design and all this stuff done. He asked me if I knew how to do that. I said no. He asked me what kind of editing software we're using. It's not the same that they're using at KNME because, of course, they have Avid and they have all this fancy stuff over there. And I said no. So he had me bring my monitor and my computer, my desktop computer, down to the New Mexico PBS station. I sat in his office for 4 days and he went through each scene with me and listened and told me when my mix was wrong, told me when I didn't have good color or I needed to bring something down. He taught me all about mixing transitions and about like fixing up some of my still stuff and just showmanship and how to make it look dazzling for PBS and all of these things I had no idea about because I had just starting to learn to edit, much less pulling out all the tools and everything that were involved in the program. So he really invested in us and spent 4 days teaching me the entire process. And I sat there and did all the color correction and all the sound mix for the entire film, and then put the score in and burned that file, sent it to PBS, and within a couple of weeks, World Channel had picked it up and asked us to distribute. And that was huge for us because we thought we were going to get a small release with Vision Maker, and it was just, we were just happy to have it over because we had, worked so long on it. But it ended up getting picked up by World Channel, and it ended up doing very well. And we were just so pleased that we were able to showcase their story and share it with so many people. But we wanted to inspire not only people on the Navajo Nation to get up and do the kind of work that the NDYC was doing, but we also wanted to inspire people across the world to do the same work. and to show them that you don't need to have a lot of money and you don't need to have a lot of influence to change basic things in your community. And when you do basic things to change and better your community, you'd be surprised by how many other people in the community follow your lead and want to be a part of that change. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway from the film, is that not only did they do all the work that they set out to do, but I think they changed a lot of minds along the way, including mine and including members of our leadership and the tribal community. I think they changed a lot of minds, and I think they showed a lot of people who it really could be done if you put your mind to it. So for that, I'm glad that we were able to make the film, and for me, because of that, we were successful because we inspired the people that we wanted to inspire, and I think we really changed the narrative because we gave people a positive view of Indian country, and we showed them young people who were making change and who are and continue to be so invested and involved in their small communities, often on their reservations. So, boy, that's a long story. I think, but we gave you the entire birth story of the mayors of Shiprock, and I think it really kind of plays into this whole idea of community changing the narrative, because I didn't realize it at the time, but I have yet to see another film that really goes so hardcore towards telling a positive story. Um, and for me, that's revolutionary. And we need to tell more of those stories. But I think all of the stories that we've ever told have been that like that. They are all about women or people in our community who are strong and who lift others up. So it's staying along in that same vein, and we'll continue to do that work.
So please join me in a virtual round of applause for Ramona Emerson. Wonderful talk, very inspiring. As I was saying before, I think there's a way that we can help you unmute if you wish to ask a question that way. You can also, you see at the bottom of your screen, I think a Q&A button, you can just type it in there. Looks like that's coming already. Something there from Mark Garrison. What should I do here, AJ? Should I read that or what?
We have a lot coming in. You can, yes, post them in the chat, use the Q&A feature or the raise hand, and then we can unmute you if you would like to speak your question. So choose your adventure there, and we'll start looking through the chat and reading out some of those as well. So lots of thank yous. Yeah, thank you very much. We have, during this process, did you gain any new perspectives of what it means to be a community?
Well, yeah, I think I did because I mean, I always just thought of a community in a very general word. I mean, yeah, I'm from, especially in the filmmaking community, you always say, well, I'm from the Native filmmaking community. It's part of the, so you think of community as this term, but there's not I mean, and now I'm even feeling like the development of our film community as even as young BIPOC and young and old BIPOC women filmmakers. There's so much of bridge building and community growing there. And so, but being a part of their lives and being a part of what they do really made me think about, I mean, I always say, oh, well, we need to change that, or something needs to be done about that, and I realized that I'm part of the problem because I'm one of those people that said, oh, somebody needs to do something about that. No, if you feel that something needs to be done about that, so often it's you that needs to do something about that. And I think for right up until I really started hanging out with these guys and realizing the importance of community is finally when I really was able to grasp my own voice, able to speak what I needed and wanted, able to communicate better about what we needed, what we wanted, and what we needed to do to make that change in my own film community. because I was inspired by the fact that these young people were so ingrained and invested in their community that they were willing to like put aside their own future. Like they were willing to like put off a year of college because they needed to get things done in Shiprock. They needed to get that park thing done. They needed to, get this thing done. So they actually took that time out of their own lives and invested it in their community. And that's real community. They didn't need money. They didn't need somebody threatening them with something to get it done, or it didn't have to get so bad that it needed to be done. They saw the need and they went and did it. And when I would see that scene with the elder when they delivered the wood, that was very early on for me in the shooting process. And that just got me. That got me for real because that lady was so grateful and so happy to have that wood. And it we showed her, and she's like the main one, but there were several elders that were reached with those wood halls. And when I saw that, that's when I saw the strength in the community because that's what it means to make the elders smile, to give something back to somebody else who has helped you for so long. It's so important. The elders are such a really important part of the community. So for me, that's what it was. That's what it was. It was non-conditional love and support, and just really just you didn't even need to know. I didn't know this lady. We just drove up in her yard and we started taking wood out, and she was, she just showed us unconditional love and was so happy to see us that I realized right then and there that's what it was about. And I also realized that that was what was it was about as far as making film too. We're not making the Mayors of Shiprock because we want to get famous. It's not it. It's or we want to further our careers. No, we're making this film because we want to show how important this work is and how you can touch the lives of so many people. And for me, that's it. That was it. That's community. That's not, that's putting yourself aside and doing things for others. So yeah, that scene got me.
We have a really nice comment from Mark Garrison I want to make sure we give attention to. He says, "Thank you for not doing poverty porn, which is why the documentary and your comments are so powerful. I also want to thank you for your humility, humanity, and ability to be, represent, and say such profound things and make them seem so much a part of the human spirit, accessible, and dare I say, normal, because I suspect they are. Captured so well is what is needed, is the media that offers inspiration grounded in the real historical and cultural experience of people, of solutions, not laments. Agency is what come to the fore, the future comes to the fore, and hope. Thank you." And he follows up with a question. Focus was on the future, the present, the youth, without ignoring history, but still, what do you attribute this forward-looking outlook of the youth? How did it emerge?
Well, I think, well, at first I think I mean, for us in the story, it emerged with Graham because he was just right away already thinking about others like immediately. And um, that idea of actually um, practicing and looking at traditional Navajo knowledge and going back to the basics. You think the youth, they're looking forward. They're going to be using tools of the future to move this process along. But in reality, what the youth did was they went backwards and they looked at how historically we were to treat each other and how historically to look at your community as a Navajo and as a family member. And um, so by looking back into their own traditional beliefs, they were able to develop and create a way to move forward. So for them, it was the wood hauling, the cleaning up they wanted their community to be beautiful. So they decided they were going to clean it up. All the way down to the tangible, like Alicio Curley teaching the elders how to weave again because they had forgotten. So all of that comes back to them learning the traditional ways and asking the difficult questions that sometimes even my generation doesn't want to ask because we're embarrassed, like how to say things in Navajo or how do we how do you do this? Because when you're removed from your community and you come back to it, there's a lot of shaming that goes into not having that traditional knowledge, and like asking the difficult questions and wanting to know the traditional practices or the traditional beliefs. And that was one of the first things that I remember noticing about this group, was that they were learning traditional beliefs, and they were learning Navajo words, and they were learning things and stories, and they were teaching me about it. And the cool thing about them was I could ask them about maybe a ceremony that I don't know, or a word that I don't understand. And they would never judge me. They would always just say, "Oh, well, you know what? That my grandpa told me that this is what it means, and that word is that." No, that's not how you say it. You say it like this. If I had, 20 years earlier, if I had asked that same question to an elder in my community, or like a cousin of mine, everybody would have been like, "Oh, dummy, you should already know that. How come you don't know that? You're just dumb." It's like, because that's, and you kind of, you grow up with that, and then after a while you just start to not want to know, because it's embarrassing that you can't speak fluently, or it's embarrassing that you don't know all the cultural stuff. But these kids, it wasn't like that for them. They were not ashamed or scared to ask the hard questions, and then when they had that knowledge, they were totally willing to share it with anybody that wanted to know. And for me, that was eye-opening, because for once it was the young people who weren't judging me for my lack of knowledge. They were teaching me about how to be good humans, and in the process, I was just there to witness it. And I'm lucky, for me, I was there to witness it. But I think that's what's so forward for you thinking about them, is the fact that they're able to look at their traditional beliefs and apply it to the future, and to find ways to make change. And for in the case of Adam, I mean, going right to the top and just going to the school board and saying, I don't like the way the school is run here at Shiprock. I want to run for the school board. And then eventually, Adam, now, I thought I would tell you guys that now Adam is the assistant to the vice president of the Navajo Nation. I mean, and a lot of these kids have gone on to do great things. A lot of them have had kids, and they've grown families, and they're adults now. They're in their late 20s, and I think Graham's in his early 30s now. So like, they've grown up, and they've accepted a lot of life's responsibilities. But in the same, it doesn't matter. They still go, and they still like do these events, and they still give back to their community, even though they're moms and dads now, and they have little kids to take care of. They're still doing that work. They're still doing the work of community building, and so they continue to be forward thinking, and they continue to make change. Oh, we have some questions coming in now. Look at this.
And that was actually, you were kind of segueing into it. We had others ask, can you tell us what some of the mayors are doing now, as well as the group?
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about Adam, doing that. Graham, Elicio, and Kevin, and Ephraim, which those four guys, they were the weavers. Graham, and then the three other guys were the weavers. Now Ephraim has been doing traditional Navajo clothes for years, and he's an incredible encyclopedia of Chacoan culture and indigenous culture of the entire Southwest. You would not believe the things he knows. That guy knows everything. But he's made this huge boom in like reviving all of these old clothing, and the stuff that the Navajos used to wear like in the 1800s, and reviving those styles and bringing them back, and putting traditional and contemporary designs into those works. And so Elicio continues to weave and to teach classes with the Debit and Nath groups, the Roy Cady and his group, and Kevin Aspis, who's the other young man who is in college in Arizona, who's also a weaver. Kevin Aspis has gone on to several blue ribbons at the Heard Museum and at the Indian Market for his weaving. He and Elicio went back to study ancient Navajo weaving techniques that haven't been used in like over 500 years, and they've been reviving them. They've been using traditional methods they actually are taking care of their herds of sheep, shearing different kinds of churro sheep, traditional sheep, actually weaving and dyeing with traditional dyes. Like everything has been done traditionally, and all of these four guys have all worked to redevelop all of that weaving technology of years past, reviving old styles, finding the old traditional techniques and learning how to use them. So those four guys are well on their way to way more things. Again, looking to the past, moving forward to the future. I actually had talked to them about making another short film with just them because of the work that they're doing there. And that's also in the works if we can ever get that together post COVID. And then Graham has actually started a farm that he and Ephraim have completely changed and cleared out this entire land that used to be used for his grandfather, their grandfather's crops that had been fallow for many years that nobody had been using. So Graham moved onto the farm and is living a very, I don't know, pretty primitive lifestyle out there as a Navajo and planting, living on the land, getting ready to start the spring crops, teaching himself about traditional knowledge, like living off the grid, solar energy, incredible stuff. And I used to always push him to finish school. And at a screening a couple of years ago, when an elder mentioned to me that there are some people who were just meant to be in our community. Maybe they're just not cut out for college. Maybe they think they want to go to college, but it's just not for them. There are just some people who are meant to be community leaders, to stay in our community and to take care of our people. And she said, and he could be one of them. So you don't need to keep pushing him to school because he may have found his calling already and he's part of that process and maybe that's all he needs. And I realized that that's probably true. And so I just try to support Graham in whatever he does. He's always got forward thinking ideas, and every summer he takes a walk. He walks to Welde, and he takes that time to really reflect on his work for the year, and he goes back to Bosque Redondo and he takes the walk home on his own. Last one year he went with his sister, but this last year he didn't get as far. He went to one of the sacred mountains and visited the sacred mountains. So he's very spiritual, and I think he's really trying to find himself still. And so we support him as much as we can, and in his work right now, he and a group of some of the NDYC members have started making little videos about businesses in the Navajo Nation and like trying to help them put their businesses out there during COVID. The last video they made was on a small business in Farmington, New Mexico that's run by a 12-year-old Navajo girl, and it's called Nijoni Soaps. And she makes all her own soaps, and they all have these really interesting, cool scents and flavors and stuff. And so like she has red dirt soap, and you can buy Navajo tea soap, and it's it's like a real grassroots thing. So they've been making these videos that showcase these businesses, again finding ways to adapt and look forward to their community and look for ways to promote the people who are trying to do business in their community. So he's still working at it. Like he still comes up with these ideas and he goes out there and he does them. And the next time you talk to him, he's on to something else. So they're always busy. So those were like the real main characters there. But a lot of the other young ladies, and like Rhiannon, she's still working as a nurse. She just had a baby. A lot of them have just had babies. Like I think 3 or 4 of them have little toddlers, or 2 to 3 year olds, and they're all doing well. They're all great parents. They've all learned, I think, from the mistakes of whatever happened to their parents or any other hardships that they've gone through, and they are exemplary parents. And Graham's oldest sister just had a daughter, so now he's an uncle. And that girl, oh my gosh, that girl is doted on. Between Graham and all his other brothers and sisters, that little child is like, they just carry her around everywhere. She's gonna have a good life, and she's gonna be one of the future community leaders. Maybe in Shiprock and maybe in Albuquerque, wherever she goes, she's going to already have that all implanted in her. So we look forward to that. Let me see. I'm trying to look through some of these questions.
Ryan Brooks has a good question there about relationship between novel writing and filmmaking. Is it part of the same artistic project or opportunities for completely different explorations? Do you feel like you can do things in your fiction that you cannot in your filmmaking and vice versa?
Yes, we had talked about that a little bit before, and the thing about filmmaking is it's so dependent on so many other things, funding, a crew, depending on what you're doing as far as documentary and narrative. You know, if you're doing narratives, you got to depend on actors and crew members and schedules and budgets. And I think that's the biggest difference between being able to work on a novel versus working as a filmmaker, because very early on, as we spoke with some of the writing students, I talked to them about the fact that fiction, for me, writing fiction was very, it was like getting free, because I had been kind of shackled. When you write a screenplay, it would always shackle me to a budget or to options that we had to shoot. So when I'm trying to write a screenplay, I'm always thinking about, oh, like, we can't afford that. Like, we'd never afford that. We'd never be able to film there, or I don't know how we would do that. So there's a budget and all these other logistics floating around in my head when I'm thinking about filmmaking, budget and grant writing. And there's just so many other arms that come in and dependent on what you do. Writing is just you. You get to go in there and you get to make up your own world, and you don't have to worry about whether you can pay for it, or you don't have to worry about whether it's going to work out logistically on the film screen, or what your composition is going to look like, or what actor you're going to get, or it doesn't matter, because you're writing this completely fiction world, and you're able to move in and out of characters, and you're able to research and learn and experiment about so many different other things that you really can't, veer too far from when you're making a film, because you have time. You only have a certain amount of time, and you're on a budget, and you've got to go all the time with the filmmaking. And so for me, writing a book and doing the fiction part is just so nice, because I can just do what I want, and I don't have to ask anybody or be dependent on anyone to do it. It's just my time to make up whatever I want, to make up my own world if I want to. And that's what I do, make up a world, and you just kind of create your space in there. And there's something about it. But at the same time, the actual construction process of both the book and the filmmaking, one of the students finally made me realize how similar the my creative process for both things are, as far as the start of projects, when I'm just kind of gleaning images and gleaning different words and stories and pulling them together, and then moving into the research stage, and moving into assembly stage, and then moving into getting the music and doing all of these things. It's the filmmaking part of it, and then getting all the editing and the streamlining done in the writing part of it. So it's very similar. When you look at the creative process of it, it's very similar. It's the money that's different. I don't have to worry about it. And like I said, this is my first novel, so I don't really know what it's like to be a writer, like, full time, because this is like my first real book and first time writing fiction. So I have no idea what to expect as far as being a writer, but I suspect that I am leaning towards it. If the first book does well, I will probably start leaning a little bit more towards that and away from the filmmaking. Mostly because it's documentary filmmaking in general takes a toll on your body. And I mean, my back hurts just for many years of lugging camera equipment around and standing there with a camera. And I think it's time that I start thinking about, like, having somebody else run the camera, and actually hiring crews to help us and doing that kind of process, because I'm just getting too burnt out on the filmmaking process, physically, mentally, spiritually. And if I'm given the opportunity to only write, I might take it. Because it's easier to do. And if I'm able to do well at it, I might go that route. But that's like after 20 years of trying to deal with the film industry. And it after a while it takes its toll. I think it's a tough. Of course I say that, but filmmaking is like the mafia. You think you're out, and they pull you back in. And like I say, I mean, we finished Mayors of Shiprock, and we already have 4 more that are at different stages. So like I'm not gonna be out of it for a while. I have to finish at least these 4 first, and then maybe we can start talking about slowing down on the filming. But you know, it's at that point.
Graham chimed in with a comment to us. Can we look forward to a 4-hour Ramona Emerson director's cut with all the white people returning back into the film?
Yeah, are you ready to see your principal come on and talk all your praises, Graham? We could leave that on for like a whole half hour. Like all the fan club and the pastor at the church, dude, big fan. You know, yeah, we should start, like, people have talked about that. Like, we should like do a 10 years from now, you know, like a 7-Up. 10 years from now, let's see where they are. Are you ready, Graham? 10 years from now? You know, so that might be interesting though. We've also had requests to do an update on Opal. We did a short film called Opal about a bunch of little Navajo kids. It's basically a Western. It's basically a Western with little Indian kids on bikes instead of cowboys on horses. So a lot of people have been asking us to like update that because Opal's like 18 now, and Bunny's like 19. So they're adults now, and they're super suave, and all those kids are the same. And it'd be fun to do a teenager version of Opal now, but we'll see. Oh, I have somebody here asking about how to view it. Yeah, the contract with World Channel just ran out, and so it's kind of hard to find it on PBS. You'll only find the trailer, but you can find it on Amazon, and you can rent it for like $2 or $3 on Amazon. So that's one way to watch the Mayors of Shiprock, and I think you can get it on pbs.org, but I'm not real sure. But the link to World Channel has been stopped because their contract ran out at the end of the year. So, but that's a sure way to get it is on Amazon. You can order it, you can buy the DVD, or you can just watch it, digital version on Amazon. Oh yeah. Oh good. Okay. Yeah, I see. I was gonna say, and I'll leave it like that for like another month so people can catch it, and then I'll probably change the password just so people can start. They have to keep buying it. You gotta keep you gotta keep the purchases going. All right, look, there's Lisa Coho. I agree. NUSC reunion. See, I miss them too, and I really wanted you guys to see like all the great things that they've done since we've been filming them. I mean, they've all become such great adults, and we're just so proud of them. And we miss them. We should go like butcher a sheep and have like a big old cookout in Shiprock, guys. I didn't know that a lot of them were going to come and visit today, so I'm really glad to see them. I'm really glad to see you guys. So, you know, we never know in the future. We never know what we could, you know, pull off. But I think the legacy of their work continues there, and they just recently elected an all-female council delegation from Shiprock. All the leaders at the council at the Shiprock chapter house are women. And I think it's a huge shift change, and I really feel like NDYC was part of that. They helped change that narrative and really helped the community of Shiprock and other communities around the nation realize how much power they have in the people. So right on. Good. I'm just so proud of them. They all do such good work. And then we have to see Graham living out in his tent out at the field too. He's tough. He's tough.
Ramona, I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to ask one, which is, can you talk a little bit about, I'm going to lose my notes here, the one about the border towns that you're working on.
Yeah, crossing the line.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We've been working on that film off and on for, like over 10 years. And it's a hard film to make. But originally it started out as just being one documentary about some of the border town issues that a lot of Navajos and natives that live in New Mexico face. A lot of Navajo communities are surround these larger cities, and because there's no infrastructure and no real business, there's no grocery stores, there's nothing like that on the reservation. Navajos and other natives have to travel miles, hours sometimes to get to one of these border towns so that they can get groceries, so they can do their laundry, so that they can, survive. So a lot of these border town communities are renowned for being very racist. Um, they are known for sometimes police brutality. They're known for racial injustice. They're known for a lot of things, a lot of horrible things that happen, economic, environmental injustice. And the thing about it is these towns are dependent on Navajo and Native people. Their economies are dependent on their visiting. But at the same time, the reservation and the Navajo government and tribal governments have also not invested, are not able, or have not invested in business on the Navajo Nation. And so a lot of Navajos are forced to go. And they are not treated well when they go to these towns. What originally started out as one documentary, a lot of our funders were just saying to us that we just don't know how we can cram all of this information into 1 hour. It's impossible. So we reformatted and repitched our project as a docu-series. And so it's going to be 4 episodes that will be based in each separate city, because each separate city has a different kind of border town racial violence that goes on there. In Albuquerque, a lot of the violence is really economic. Most of the people who are abused or are killed in our city are natives who live on the streets, and a lot of them live on the streets because they come from these surrounding communities. They go to school, they work, and then they lose their job or they lose their financial stability, and they end up on the streets, and then they end up dead a lot of times because they're brutalized on the streets by people. In Farmington, it's been called the Selma of the Southwest. Racial, just horrible racial injustices and violence have been happening against Navajo people for years, including Chili Yazzie, who was injured by a white supremacist who shot his arm off. He was the chapter president, the mayors of Shiprock that you'll remember. He was even a victim of this violence. A lot of lives have been lost. They have a tradition there in the high school called rolling, where they go out and pick up natives, get them drunk, and throw them off of cliffs. I mean, these are things that go on that people just don't know because those stories aren't told. And then Gallup is really an economic, and in Gallup we're following the story of Larry Casus, who was killed in the early 1970s by the Gallup Police Department. And there's like a group of 5 families in Gallup that really run the roost. They control like all of the liquor licensing. So much of the business that goes on in Gallup is dependent on Navajo people, and they use Navajo labor, they use Navajo money. But then when it's time to help Navajos out, they don't have nothing to do with it. So there's just so many problems with Gallup. Farmington, and it's been like a colonial problem for years. I mean, Gallup was started and named after the guy who did the paychecks at the railroads. So I mean, this has been like a colonial town forever, and it continues to be. And then in Flagstaff and in Winslow, Arizona, we're kind of merging those 2 cities because they're so close. But we're really examining the murder of L'Oreal Senegini. She's a Navajo woman who was brutally murdered by a police officer on camera, accidentally for him. The whole thing was caught on camera. But she is just one of many Native people who have been brutally killed by the police in those areas, in Flagstaff and in Winslow. So each town has a different story and a different character that we're following, and they're very difficult stories to tell. But I think because people are so shocked when I tell them about the things that happen in these towns, that then it just keeps reminding me about that's why we're making this film, because we need to make people aware of what goes on in these towns, and we need to make our leadership aware so that there's some kind of change that happens. And if we don't do something, we don't make people aware, and we don't make that change, people will continue to lose their lives. And so for me, it's a critical thing. And the way that we're going to do it without without relying on poverty porn is by telling the stories of the people who are actively fighting against it. The organizations, the community organizers, the protesters, the families of these people who have been brutalized, the police officers who are standing up and making their voices heard about what they've seen that's gone wrong in the police department. So we're focusing on the stories of the people who are trying to make change and continuing our quest in telling truth, but also figuring out a way to positively tell the story and to figure out avenues of change, figure out what kind of discussions do we need to have to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. How can we make change in police policy? How can we make change in how we treat indigent people on the streets? How can we make change in how people view these Navajo people that are coming into their communities? And in order to do that, we have to show them, we have to give them a better idea of who we are. And that's part of this process. That's part of making these positive films and showing people the real heart of who these Native people are and what they really believe in. And in that way, they become a human. They're not an object to make money off of, or another check mark on their applications. We're real people, and we have real beliefs. And if you contact us and talk to us, we can make change together. But as long as they continue to push people away and to not address the situations that are going on in these cities, it'll continue to happen. So that is our project. That's probably going to be the biggest project that we're going to be working on over the next couple of years. And we're hoping to at least get the Albuquerque and Gallup episodes done within the next year and a half. So we can have half of the project done, or at least close to done, and hopefully get more funding for the other 2 episodes. So those are our hopes.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer, though. Very, very good. If I may, one more question, and maybe, and again, I don't want to, if there's are there any other questions out there that are floating around? So I'm gonna try and ask this question, and I hope it's not a huge question. So maybe I'll ask you if you can keep it kind of succinct. If there's one thing in these stories you're telling about leaders who are trying to make progressive change, whether that be younger people or activists or yourself as a filmmaker, when you see people becoming leaders, how is that leadership defined? What does leadership mean to you?
Well, I think leadership really is based on being able to be open and being able to listen and to being able to absorb everything and then make action on that, and thinking of the larger group, not thinking so much of how you as a leader would be, how you as a leader are moving forward, but how your decisions will affect everyone else, and hopefully in a positive way. So we kind of talked about that earlier too, is like being a director, and like, how do you do that? How do you delegate authority? How do you ask for help in a positive way? And that's part of being a leader, is being able to reach out to people and taking it all in, and then making the decision to move forward, and really having a selflessness to the work that you're doing. That, I think, really is the key to being an excellent leader, is to not think about yourself, but to think about all the people that need your help.
Thank you. That's perfect. We have a suggestion out here from Emily Kinsky that maybe we at West Texas A&M should start a Kickstarter fund to support your next massive editing project.
Kickstarters, those are rough. I've had our Kickstarter before. And all the work is after you get the money. That's when all the work really starts.
Right.
And all those boxes of stuff you promise people, and it's insanity. It's just as hard as doing the film, raising that money.
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ramona Emerson. This was just a wonderful evening, and your
Good.
story is just wonderful, and your films are wonderful. I need to see Opal. I haven't seen that. It sounds wonderful as well. So thank you again. We're going to give you another big virtual round of applause. And thank you to all of you in the audience who came and asked questions and made comments. I really appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed it. Please look for Seesaw's upcoming events. And just cheers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and healthy.
That was great. It really was wonderful. Thank you. We're filing out.
Yeah, looks like it. Oh, so good to see Graham. Yay. He gets misty. He gets misty.
I think there was one that had posted a thank you in the Q&A as well and said this was the soul food that she needed. Thank you.
Oh, good. That's so good to hear. Well, thank you, everyone. That's a great event. I'm sorry, couldn't be in person, but still, this was very awesome. And I saw you had quite a group of people here tonight. I have yet to have a Zoom with that many people. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, we got to like 74, I think.
Usually there's like 3 or 4 people.
Well, I'm glad I got up there a little bit. So tomorrow we'll do the salon lunch.